What if the world you know is only a fraction of what's really out there? From people vanishing mid-step to living storms that seem to watch, these terrifying events defy science, reason, even time itself. Authorities offer no answers, and those who investigate often disappear without a trace. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Here are 5 terrifying phenomena experts still can't explain, and they might be closer than you think. Welcome to Unsolved Archives, where we delve into the hidden, the mysterious, and the unanswered. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight could be the key to unlocking the truth. The lights of Dellingham Ridge. Dellingham Ridge was the kind of place that only locals ever talked about, and even they didn't like to mention it after dark. Nestled deep within the dense forested ranges of northern Montana, the ridge stood silent and seemingly untouched by time. Only a narrow, cracked trail curled around the hills, used rarely by hikers, more often by game. There were no guideposts, no signs, no phone signal, just trees, mist, and the eerie quiet of nature holding its breath. Locals, particularly the older generations, spoke cautiously about the lights. The earliest reports came from the 1930s, when loggers would finish their shifts at dusk and see orbs dancing between the treetops. Over time, the tales grew more specific. The lights appeared only during the autumn equinox, always at nightfall, and always in total silence. They glowed in slow pulses, amber, blue, sometimes green. They were never harsh, never strobe-like, more like lanterns moving behind invisible hands. In 1994, a group of amateur researchers from Missoula decided to study the phenomenon. Led by 26-year-old grad student Evan Rourke, they formed the Dellingham Observation Group. Equipped with 3 trail cameras, EMF sensors, and audio recorders, the team set up camp near the heart of the ridge on September 19th, for days before the equinox. The woods welcomed them with a chilling stillness, the kind that makes you hear your own breathing too loudly. The first 2 nights passed without incident. The cameras captured the occasional deer, and one bear that sniffed near the tents. On the 3rd night, however, the group reported hearing a soft hum, barely audible, not mechanical, not natural, something else entirely. They described it as a tone that vibrated the inside of their skulls more than it filled the air. Then, just past 9 p.m., the lights appeared. 3 orbs, 2 amber, 1 icy blue, emerged silently from between the trees, gliding no more than 4 feet above the ground. They moved independently, yet mirrored each other's curves, never touching but always circling, like fireflies performing a choreographed ritual. The team stared in a mix of awe and terror. None of them approached, but all of them recorded. At 10:02 p.m., the lights shot skyward in unison and vanished. The hum ceased instantly. It was over. Back in Missoula the next day, the group reviewed the footage, or tried to. All 3 trail cameras had suffered data corruption. One camera was physically intact but contained no video files. Another's memory card had been wiped clean. The 3rd showed glitching static for the exact 67 minutes the lights were visible. The audio recorders caught only forest sounds until 8:57 p.m., when they abruptly went silent and resumed at 10:03, as if someone had pressed pause. Despite this, the group swore by what they saw. Rourke, in his report, wrote, "I would bet my life on what we witnessed. The lights were real. Their movement was too precise, their appearance too timed. This was not a random natural event." The story caught minor local press attention, but without solid evidence, most dismissed it as exaggerated campfire lore. A few paranormal forums hosted heated debates, some offering theories involving atmospheric plasma, others insisting on secret military tech. One commenter, claiming to be an ex-ranger, posted a chilling warning: "You saw what you weren't meant to. The ridge watches back." What made things even stranger was that in 1995, the trail up to Dellingham Ridge was blocked off by a series of quiet forestry projects. Fences went up. Danger, unstable terrain signs were installed. But no one could find records of erosion or landslides. Drones flown over the area caught nothing unusual, just endless forest. In 1999, Rourke attempted a second expedition with a new team and newer equipment. They never reached the camp. According to park rangers, a tree had fallen across the trail the morning they set out, a massive pine, uprooted cleanly as if cut. When they returned the next week, the tree was gone. Rourke reportedly never attempted another visit. As the years passed, sightings continued, but always sporadic. Hikers, the few that still ventured close, reported hearing the same hum. One man, in 2004, claimed he followed the orbs for over an hour, unable to stop himself, until he woke up sitting in the cold mud at dawn with no memory of how he got there. His watch had stopped at 9:58 p.m. In 2011, satellite images revealed an odd heat signature on the ridge during the equinox, a symmetrical triangle roughly 200 feet wide. No source could be identified. The image was pulled from public view a week later. The elders in nearby towns remain silent. When asked, they shake their heads, murmur about spirits that don't sleep, and change the subject. A few say it began before their grandparents were born, and that the lights are not just lights. They're eyes, one woman whispered. And sometimes, they want you to follow. Today, Dellingham Ridge is officially closed to visitors, though the signs are easy to step around. Every September, thrill seekers try to glimpse the phenomenon. Most come back with nothing but stories. A few come back changed, quieter, eyes unfocused, unable to sleep without all the lights on. What the lights are remains unsolved. Whether they are natural, technological, or something far older, no one can say for sure. But every autumn, as the leaves burn red and the cold begins to settle, the ridge waits. And sometimes, the lights return. The Whispering School. It had been boarded up since 1953, its once grand brick facade now cracked and overgrown with ivy. Children hadn't walked the hallways of St. Winifred's School for Girls in decades. The building sat like a forgotten relic in the Kent countryside, ignored, avoided, and slowly decaying beneath years of wind and rain. Most who passed by dismissed it as an ordinary ruin, another casualty of age. But those who ventured too close, especially at dusk, told a different tale. The first whispers started in 2007, when the land was purchased by a small development firm aiming to repurpose the property into high-end flats. Surveyors were sent in to take structural notes. One of them, a young man named Daniel Hughes, left the site early, pale and shaken. When questioned, he said he'd heard voices, children's voices, whispering behind the door of a room at the end of the hall. It wasn't the kind of whispering that felt mischievous or playful. It was rhythmic, deliberate, as if reciting. 2 more workers reported the same thing days later. Whispering, singing, sometimes giggling, all coming from behind closed doors in rooms that were, by all visual accounts, completely empty. One claimed he heard scratching, faint and frantic, from inside the walls. The crew was skeptical at first, chalking it up to acoustics or nerves, until someone finally opened one of the doors mid-whisper and found only dust, old desks, and collapsing plaster. But the whispering had stopped instantly. The developers brought in a local historian to investigate. Her name was Dr. Marion Latch, and she was familiar with St. Winifred's reputation. The school had been run by a small order of Anglican sisters known for their strict discipline and isolationist rules. According to records, the school had operated from 1861 to 1953, and at its peak had over 70 students. Yet, curiously, no class photographs remained. Only a single, blurred portrait of a nun standing in front of the main hall, eyes obscured, expression unreadable. Dr. Latch's interest intensified when she found discrepancies in the architectural plans. The blueprints from 1952 showed 5 classrooms on the upper floor. The current structure had 6. One room had no official record, no history, no mention in any documents, and it was from that room the majority of whispers had been reported. Intrigued, she obtained permission to spend a night in the school, bringing with her a voice recorder, a digital camera, and a thermographic scanner. She documented her findings meticulously. The temperature in the unregistered room dropped by 10 degrees within minutes of entry. Her camera refused to focus inside the room. The recorder captured what sounded like breath, not wind, not machinery, but shallow, close, human breath. Then came the whispers. Clearer than any other account before, They spoke in soft, overlapping tones. At one point, the recording caught the sound of a girl repeating, 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. The voice was distant but steady, like a child trying not to get the answer wrong. Dr. Latch left at sunrise and submitted the audio to an analyst, who confirmed the recording had no cuts or edits and showed no signs of tampering. The next week, a portion of the second-floor hallway collapsed, and behind the fallen wall was a hidden door, sealed with rusted iron and marked with a faded chalk cross. When forced open, the room inside was filled with old desks, overturned chairs, and a thick layer of dust. On the blackboard, still faintly visible in old chalk, were lines of arithmetic, a child's handwriting, repeated again and again, as if from punishment. What startled the workers most was the row of small shoes lined against the wall. 10 pairs, different sizes, some decayed nearly to nothing. No bones were found. No evidence of foul play. Just the shoes, and a strange, earthy scent that none could identify. After that, the redevelopment halted. Workers refused to return. Dr. Latch continued her research and discovered that in 1953, the school had abruptly closed following a disciplinary incident. The specifics were buried in diocesan records, but one name kept appearing in faded ledgers: Sister Imelda. She had been the headmistress for nearly 30 years. No death certificate was found. No record of her ever leaving the property. In 2008, a local paranormal team snuck into the building and broadcast a live-stream investigation. Midway through, the sound of slow, synchronized clapping echoed through the halls, though no one could identify the source. In the background of one frame, a faint silhouette of a woman in a nun's habit appeared briefly, facing away from the camera. The feed cut out seconds later. Local authorities labeled it a hoax and padlocked the school again. Since then, no attempts have been made to enter. The surrounding community avoids the grounds. Children dare each other to throw stones at the front doors but never get close. Locals say the whispers have grown bolder, sometimes heard from the outside steps. As for Dr. Latch, she withdrew from public research in 2009 and has since refused to comment on her time at St. Winifred's. In one of her last published papers, she wrote, "Some structures hold memory. Others hold something else. And some, very few, hold the echo of discipline so cruel, it outlives the hand that gave it." To this day, no records can explain the extra room. And still, sometimes, if you stand outside the broken windows just before dusk, you might hear the rustle of skirts, the quiet shuffle of feet, and the soft voice of a girl whispering her multiplication tables in the dark. The Vanishing Convoy. The Karakoram Highway is often called the eighth wonder of the world, a staggering feat of engineering slicing through the rugged mountains between Pakistan and China. It's also one of the most dangerous roads on Earth, winding along the edge of cliffs, through avalanche-prone valleys and miles of barren, echoing silence. But none of its perils have puzzled investigators more than the disappearance of Convoy Echo 5 in the winter of 1981. The convoy consisted of 5 military transport vehicles, all carrying sealed cargo and personnel. Their destination was classified, but records later revealed they were heading toward a remote communication outpost high in the mountains. It was a routine movement on paper: 17 soldiers, 3 technical engineers, and a small escort of armed support. The journey should have taken no more than 16 hours. But they never arrived. Their last confirmed stop was a fuel checkpoint in Desu at 7:43 a.m. The lead officer, Captain Azza Mahmood, signed the logbook, spoke with the attendant, and confirmed the route. He was calm, focused, and showed no concern. The weather was cold, but clear. There was no warning. By 9 p.m. that night, the convoy was declared overdue. Search teams were dispatched immediately. What they found, or rather, what they didn't find, has remained one of the region's most enduring mysteries. There were no tire tracks past the last known checkpoint. No signs of struggle or weather-related detours. No burnt wreckage. No radio transmissions. It was as though the entire convoy had simply ceased to exist. The snow, which had started to fall lightly around noon that day, should have partially preserved signs of movement, especially given the size of the vehicles. But the trail ended abruptly, several miles before the next known curve. The only clue was a partially buried military radio unit, found in a shallow ditch beside the road, still powered on and emitting low static. Attempts to retrieve data from the device yielded a single corrupted log entry. The timestamp was 10:47 a.m., several hours after they should have reached the mountain pass. The entry simply read, "We saw the road split. But there's only one." This message ignited confusion and speculation. No alternate routes existed in that region. The terrain made it impossible. Satellite imagery confirmed a single paved stretch with no forks or junctions for at least 50 kilometers. Some believed the convoy had mistakenly followed a smuggler's trail, though this didn't explain the complete lack of debris or bodies. Others suggested an ambush, but no enemy forces were active in that area, and there were no signs of conflict. The most radical theories proposed the convoy stumbled upon something not meant to be seen, or that the road itself had changed. In 1982, a shepherd named Ibrahim Hussein claimed to see headlights weaving along a ridge trail in the dead of night. The lights made no sound, no engine noise, and seemed to float just above the ground. When he approached, the lights vanished into mist. He reported it to the police, who dismissed it as fatigue. But others began coming forward with similar stories, travelers glimpsing convoys that weren't there, seeing tail lights where there should be none. In 1984, a mountaineer named Fiona Adler captured a photo from a peak overlooking the valley. In the distance, obscured by fog, were 5 silhouettes, large, rectangular, and arranged in a staggered military formation. The image was analyzed and debated for years. Some said it was a trick of perspective. Others insisted it matched the dimensions of military transports. Years passed. The families of the lost men received no closure. The case was buried in red tape and eventually shelved as a cold file. No memorials were erected. Even now, many locals avoid the topic, claiming it brings misfortune. But there are still whispers. One popular rumor involves a phenomenon known among truck drivers as the second road. Described as a split that appears only under certain weather conditions, fog, snow, or cold moonlight, it allegedly looks identical to the main road but feels wrong. Drivers who follow it report nausea, dizziness, or missing time. One driver who refused to give his name claimed he took the second road for nearly 20 minutes before realizing he was circling the same curve over and over, despite the GPS showing a straight line. He turned around. Most don't. In 1997, a retired colonel broke his silence in a rare interview, saying, "We lost more than a convoy that day. We lost a line between the real and the unreal. I don't know what they drove into, but I know it wasn't on any map." Today, Convoy Echo 5 remains an official incident of unexplained disappearance. No wreckage has ever been found. No signs of life. Nothing. But the static from that recovered radio still lingers in a secure evidence vault, archived and ignored. Some claim if you play it long enough and isolate the background noise, you can hear faint tapping, like Morse code. Others say you hear voices. One engineer even reported hearing the phrase, "We're still moving," deep beneath the static. And every few years, on the coldest nights of winter, travelers along that stretch of highway say they see headlights in the distance. Moving slowly. Silently. Always in a group of 5. They never catch up. The Echoes under Waverly Bay. Waverly Bay was a quiet coastal town on the northern edge of Maine, the kind of place where generations lived and died within a 10-mile radius. Life there revolved around fishing, storms, and silence. The locals were kind, but cautious. Outsiders were welcome during the summer, but never encouraged to stay. And no one, absolutely no one, went diving near the western cliff face. Not since 1968. Beneath those cliffs, the shoreline curled into a submerged cave system locals called the Bellows. At low tide, the water lapped gently against the entrance. At high tide, it thundered like a beast in pain. Old maps show the cave stretching nearly a mile inland beneath the town, though most of it remains unexplored. Every attempt to chart it had ended in failure or, worse, disappearance. The most infamous case was that of Alan Draper, a local diver and amateur geologist. He was 42, experienced, and known for being meticulous. In late August 1968, he entered the bellows with a full diving rig and 2 backup oxygen tanks, aiming to map a passage that legend claimed led to a cathedral chamber filled with bioluminescent algae. He never came back up. The Coast Guard searched for days. His tether line was found, cleanly severed 180 feet in. No bite marks, no fraying. Just a single, perfect cut, as if made by a blade. His body was never recovered. After Draper's disappearance, the town passed an ordinance forbidding all diving along the western cliffs. Officially, it was due to unstable rock structures. But among locals, another story persisted. Those who entered the caves sometimes heard voices. Not echoes, voices. Calling, muttering, weeping. One fisherman described it as being spoken to through the water. Another claimed to hear his own name whispered back to him in a voice that wasn't quite human. In 1993, a small documentary crew from New York visited Waverly Bay to investigate the folklore. They were skeptics, 3 young filmmakers chasing strange myths for a show that never aired. Their visit was unannounced, brief, and ended suddenly. Locals remember them checking into the inn, interviewing several residents, and asking increasingly pointed questions about the noises under the town. Then they vanished. Their vehicle was found parked near the cliffs 3 days later, doors locked, equipment inside. No signs of foul play. Their last recording, recovered from a waterproof case, showed them hiking toward the cave entrance, talking casually. The audio captured the sound of wind, seagulls, and something else, a deep, rhythmic hum, like breathing filtered through stone. It faded in and out, low enough to miss on first listen, but undeniable upon replay. The footage ends as the lead filmmaker, a woman named Kara Ellis, turns to the camera and says, "Can you hear that? It's saying something." Cut to black. The footage is archived in a private vault in Boston. It's never been made public. Local fishermen believe the caves are alive. Not metaphorically, literally. Some claim they feel pressure changes in the water long before a storm, like the sea itself is inhaling. A few say they've seen strange shapes moving beneath the waves, long and slow, like shadows brushing just beneath the surface. One trawler captain swore he saw lights flickering inside the cave entrance at night, pulsing with the same rhythm as the tide. In 2008, a team of researchers from a nearby university attempted to lower an underwater drone into the bellows. It descended for 15 minutes before the signal cut out. The last transmission showed a tunnel lined not just with rock, but with something else, symmetrical ridges along the walls, like bones or structures. One researcher described them as vertebral patterns, as if the cave had a spine. The drone was never recovered. A year later, the project was quietly shelved. The lead scientist, Dr. Elena Madsen, left the university and moved inland. She never published her findings, but during a podcast interview in 2014, she hinted at what she believed. There are sounds beneath Waverly Bay that do not match any known natural phenomenon. If it's an echo of something we were never meant to hear. To this day, Waverly Bay remains quiet. No major tourist development has ever succeeded. The town resists change, as if held in place by something older than concrete and politics. The cliffs stand watch, worn but unmoved, and the tides continue their endless cycle, in and out, like breath. On certain nights, especially during the spring equinox, the water under the cliffs becomes unusually still. Locals say you can stand at the edge and hear it, a low murmur, like a congregation praying in some impossible language. If you stay too long, the sound begins to shape itself, syllables, phrases, sometimes names. A few brave or foolish souls have tried to record it. The recordings never play back. Every file ends in silence. But some listeners, especially those who've lived in Waverly Bay all their lives, say they can still hear it anyway. Not through the speakers. Through the floor. Through the walls. Through the water running in their homes. A town council member once admitted, after too many drinks, "We don't talk about what's under us. Because it listens. And sometimes, it remembers who listens back." The caves remain sealed by rusted chains and warning signs. But if you stand close enough, late enough, you might just hear it. The breathing, calling you in. The man who watched the storm. In the spring of 1974, a freak thunderstorm rolled across the Midwest, so violent and sudden that meteorologists were left scrambling to understand its origin. It came without warning, over flat, silent land, and appeared to build itself from nothing. Radar showed it erupt over a 25-square-mile stretch of farmland in central Nebraska, and then vanish within the hour, leaving no rain, no lightning strikes, not even wet earth. Except for one witness. A retired railway worker named Ellis Granger lived alone just outside the small town of Elmswood, in a house passed down through 4 generations. He had no phone, no radio, and lived largely off-grid. But that night, Ellis walked into the Elmswood police station wearing a soaked trench coat, barefoot, and muttering the same phrase over and over. "It looked back at me." At first, officers thought he was drunk or in shock. But when they sat him down and dried him off, his story became clearer. Not more rational, but chilling in its consistency. Ellis claimed he'd been standing on his porch when he saw a light in the distance, far above the fields. At first, he thought it was ball lightning or a transformer blowing out. But then the light began to move, slowly, deliberately, not across the land, but downward, as though lowering itself from the sky on an invisible rope. He described a soundless funnel, not of wind, but of static, a visible distortion in the air, like heat rising from asphalt, but stretching downward like a finger. It stopped just above the field, and then everything, birds, crickets, even the breeze, went utterly still. Then came the eye. That's what Ellis called it. A shape formed in the center of the distortion, perfectly round, deep black, with a shimmer around the edges. He couldn't describe it in more detail, only that he knew it was looking at him. He went inside, locked the door, but found the house suffocatingly hot. The walls seemed to pulse, he said, like lungs trying to breathe. Then the floor began to vibrate, gently at first, then in rhythm, like a heartbeat. His windows stayed clear despite the heavy rain outside. In fact, he said, the rain was falling in a circle only around his property. Beyond his fence, the land remained dry. When he opened his eyes, and he insisted he hadn't meant to fall asleep, it was morning. Everything was dry again. No storm. No sound. No evidence of what he'd seen. But in the dirt just outside his front door, perfectly centered and burned into the soil, was a symbol, a ring with 7 hash marks surrounding it like rays of a sun. He took a photo, though it was later lost in transit to a weather bureau. But several townsfolk confirmed seeing it with their own eyes before it was mysteriously plowed under by county workers, by order of the state. Over the next 2 months, strange phenomena began to plague Elmswood. People reported migraines during cloudless days. Electrical interference spiked every Thursday at exactly 3:11 p.m., despite no pattern in weather or infrastructure. Dogs began refusing to go near the southern edge of town, barking uncontrollably when forced. Crops in certain patches grew with unnatural speed, but rotted from the inside. One family's well water turned to a syrupy, dark liquid that lab tests couldn't identify. Not toxic, but thick and somehow resistant to light, as one technician put it. Ellis began keeping a log of the storms. Not meteorological ones, the silent storms, as he called them. He'd draw them in charcoal, long swirling columns in the sky with strange geometric shapes embedded inside. Sometimes they had openings. Sometimes they had legs. Always, he said, they hovered. By 1976, Ellis was a recluse. The townsfolk grew wary of him, saying he'd changed. He no longer wore shoes, muttered to himself constantly, and kept dozens of clocks on his wall, all ticking out of sync. One neighbor swore she saw him walking backward across his field in the moonlight, arms raised like he was praising something no one else could see. Then, he vanished. His house was found unlocked, the clocks all frozen at 3:11 p.m. The symbol in the soil had returned, only this time burned into the hardwood floor of his living room. No sign of forced entry. No sign of struggle. His clothes remained, neatly folded on his bed. The only item missing was his journal. Years later, in 1993, a college student researching Midwest folklore found a single, scorched notebook in the Elmswood Library's donation box. No one knew who left it. Inside were dozens of pages filled with drawings, rambling notes, and one recurring phrase, written again and again in margins and between entries. "The eye never blinks." One entry, dated the day before his disappearance, reads, "It has moved beneath us now, watching through the roots, feeling through the stone. It learned the shape of the storm to mimic curiosity. It comes not for answers, but to see what we do when it arrives. Every 34 months. Always in the same place. It doesn't hunt. It observes." The symbol, the ring and hash marks, was found carved into a rock in the middle of a new housing development in 2002. The rock was removed, buried during foundation work. A month later, the entire basement level of the first house built there collapsed into a sinkhole overnight. No storm was reported that day. Locals have long since stopped speaking of Ellis Granger. The land where he lived has grown thick with weeds. No house stands there now. But some travelers still stop to look, drawn by something they can't quite explain. A pressure in the air. A heat on the skin, even in winter. And sometimes, just as the sun begins to set, the sky above the field wavers, like something breathing in the clouds, watching again. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?